Okay, trying again. Let's see. Hopefully Amanda will be joining in a moment. Amanda, if you're watching, I sent a request for you. There we go.
There we go. You never know how long it's gonna take to get on, like the little circle loading.
Right. Oh. Yay. Okay. Awesome. We are now going to just give some people, oopsies, I don't want that, some time to jump in.
Yeah, I shared it on my page, so I have a feeling a lot of people from my community will be on as well, which will be fun.
Great. Yes. The more the merrier. So where are you located? I know you're in Central Time.
I'm in Texas.
Denver, right? Yeah.
No, it's like I'm like a maybe like 40 minutes north of Austin.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I've been to Austin. I went there for a course actually years and years ago, and it was a lot of fun. I want to go
Yeah.
back.
It's a good area. I'm in a hotel right now because we've had crazy weather. So we don't have any water where we live, but
Oh,
yeah. That's
that's
why I was like in the business center and they like kicked me out and I was like, okay, I'll go upstairs. So if my dogs bark, that is why.
fine. If you hear kids, that's
Totally normal.
Oh, yeah, that's no fun. That's no fun at all.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, why don't we get started? A whole bunch of people have jumped in, and I'm sure they'll just continue to jump in. So, for those who are joining us, this is my fertility expert series, and today I am welcoming Amanda. I'm gonna butcher your last name, which is terrible. Montalvo.
Montalvo, yeah.
Montalvo. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So, Amanda is a women's health dietitian that helps women get to the root cause of hormone imbalances and have healthy menstrual cycles. She started off her education in nutrition with the traditional route, but after dealing with her own health problems, after getting off hormone birth control, I know how that is, quickly realized the value of functional medicine. So I am right there with you in terms of getting off of birth control. That was an interesting journey for me
Yeah.
as well. So
I feel like it's ever evolving.
yes. So welcome. And for those who don't know me, I am Dr. Ryan Bailey. I am a women's health physical therapist, and I help women from preconception to postpartum heal a lot of physical ailments that cause infertility, to issues during pregnancy, to issues that may result in birth complications, as well as healing from birth. So I'm super excited to have Amanda here with us, and we are going to be discussing She's going to be doing a lot of it. I'm going to be jumping in, um, discussing how to improve your progesterone levels naturally. And she's going to target, especially those who have an underactive thyroid, to help us figure out what's going on. So, Amanda, I'm going to pass it over to you to kind of start this conversation going about our progesterone levels.
So I feel like, I'm happy we're focusing on progesterone because I feel like a lot of the times women come to me with like estrogen dominance. How do I get rid of my estrogen dominance? That's like always kind of the main focus. And my take on all of this is really that we should be focusing more on how much progesterone we're making and is it adequate to oppose that estrogen, right? Because really, that's the hormone when people say like I want to balance my hormones, I want to feel good, I want to have pain-free periods. It's progesterone that really allows us to do that. So that's kind of why I focus on it so much. And we're focusing more on the thyroid piece. This will probably get very in depth. And I got so many questions on thyroid last week. I was like, just come to the live because it's so much easier to just like talk it all out. But really when our thyroid's not functioning optimally or we can't use that thyroid hormone properly in the body, that's when we end up typically not making as much progesterone. So it all goes hand in hand, and just like most things in the body, they're definitely connected.
Right. And progesterone is so important, especially during that luteal phase for implantation. And I mean, it's so important. So yeah, it's definitely a hormone to have balanced in the body. So how do you help women then understand how to balance that and how do you, let's dive in there.
So when it comes to like one, are my progesterone levels adequate? Typically, if you have symptoms, probably not, right? There's probably something going on there. You could definitely do testing. I like the Dutch test. You could also do Prove test strips. Have you heard of Prove?
Not.
Okay, so you'd probably love these for your clients. So there are these test strips that measure the same urine metabolite that the Dutch test measures for progesterone. So it's not measuring your levels, it's just measuring if you actually made progesterone and ovulated. So it's a great tool. And if you're like, I'm not going to go out and pay for a Dutch test, like try the Prove strips and see, am I in fact making progesterone and ovulating? Because sometimes women just really don't know. It can be hard to tell. So
Right.
that's kind of like step one. You could also use your basal body temperature, which tells you more about your metabolism. It should increase the second half of your cycle after you ovulate. If you're seeing it's not going up very high or if it's below 97.8, ideally second half of your cycle it's in the 98s. So if it's below that, that's another insight. Okay, so I might not be making as much progesterone, but it could also just be that your metabolism is just a little bit slower. So that's kind of like step number one. Let's assess where we're at. And I do think it's important to get data, whether that's Dutch testing, Prove strips, body temperature, or all of the above. I think everyone should do body temperature because you can do it at home and it's basically free as long as you have a thermometer. So that's kind of like the first piece. And then when the other big area that I'm thinking about is say I have a client that's got period problems, they're having a hard time conceiving or maintaining a pregnancy, then that is one where I'm thinking, okay, so what's going on in your day to day? Like, is your body in a constant state of stress, or is it fed really well, supported, you can handle stress? Like, what does this look like, and what's kind of filling up your stress bucket? So that is one, usually where I start with people, and we start digging into their food is usually the first thing because we have so much control over that for the most part. Or at least it's something that's a lot easier to change than others. And so when we think about how are we going to eat to support progesterone, and really that just goes back to stress, right? Like how much stress are you dealing with? How are we going to reduce our stress? I think the first step of that is looking at, am I eating regularly throughout the day? So like, are you eating breakfast or are you putting that off for many, many hours? I think if you can just wake up, eat within 30 to 60 minutes, that's like the best way to start your day because you're fed, you're not making a bunch of cortisol first thing, and it's going to help keep your blood sugar more stable throughout the day and help you sleep better. So that's usually like step number one is like try to eat breakfast within an hour. And I don't know if you want to talk about that or you want me to keep going. It's a
Yeah.
lot. I just kind of like,
I don't do really any of the diet piece,
okay,
because I'm the movement piece, and I
okay.
think that um, I definitely agree with the finding what's going on in your day to day and choosing the things that you have control over. Diet is a huge piece, and I send people to who are the experts on that. I certainly go over the very basics that I have training in for like the bowel and bladder habits and that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, is your body in constant state of stress in that fight or flight? In terms of me, to helping then the progesterone is movement and helping you figure out really how to stress manage. And for a lot of people, exercise is a huge way to do that. And finding though the healthy level of exercise is sometimes the hardest piece. Is either it's too much and you're doing it, you're just, it's like if you don't do it you go insane, or you just haven't found that balance of, okay, I want to move but the motivation is hard and there's other barriers. So that's really where I come in terms of feeling like it's really, really important to find what's going to work for you through movement. Um, and I would say just anything that's going to help you reduce the stress levels that may interfere with your progesterone. And I do a lot of body work around that too, in teaching for that, for reducing the actual physical effects of stress, because sometimes we can't really get rid of the stress in our life. Especially nowadays, it's somewhat harder to do that. But reducing the physical impacts of stress through your own body work can be really powerful too, for helping balancing. So,
Yeah, I could see that. And I will say, like, on that kind of topic with the whole stress thing, that so many people focus on reducing stress. And like, while I think that that's helpful, if anything, I'm like, we should be trying to make our bodies more resilient to stress, because I think that
right.
this is kind of the world that we live in. And even before COVID and everything, like, I really think that we've always been in a hyper go go go, like fight or flight state for the most part for most people. And so now it's just like everything is exacerbated.
Right.
But when we think about like how can we make our bodies more resilient, that's why I talk about balancing your blood sugar and trying to eat consistently throughout the day, eating breakfast, because if your food is adding to your stress, you're missing out on a huge advantage you could be having for supporting progesterone. And like eating breakfast within an hour of waking, but then also eating regularly throughout the day. Like, don't go a super long time, like more than 4 or 5 hours between meals. And I know that there's a lot of people that are like intermittent fasting, there are all these extremes, like you should only eat 3 meals a day and like no snacks. I'm the complete opposite of that. And probably because like you, I'm typically working with compromised women. Like, their hormones are out of balance, their thyroids are sluggish, they've got all these other stressors. So your food shouldn't be adding to that. And if anything, it should be used very therapeutically to reduce that stress. So like, for example, if someone comes to me and they have very low progesterone, but say they are ovulating, they're just not making a lot, then I'm like, where is this going? Like, why are you not making it? What is it being used for? Because we will absolutely use progesterone to respond to stress. It protects our bodies from stress. It's like very anti-inflammatory. And so then that's when we come at the like blood sugar piece of, well, if we eat very regularly throughout the day, this is gonna make it so that your blood sugar is pretty much always stable, and you're not going to have these drops in blood sugar that lead to an increase in cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And this is when people are like, what about fasting? Like, what's your take on fasting for hormones? I'm like, there is no fasting for hormone health. Like, in my opinion, I just think it's like you can't, they don't go together. It's like putting like fire on like putting fuel on a fire that's just like already going. Like, what's the point? So I feel like when that's one of the easiest things that we can all do. And people could even start doing after this live and thinking about like, am I eating in a way that is like reducing my stress or adding to my stress?
Well, yeah, and something I want to get back to something that you just said about the fasting and how there's so many different fertility cleanses and things. And something that's really stuck with me from one of my courses is that um, liver function requires protein,
Yeah.
amino acids. And so if you fast, you are not supporting your natural liver function, which if that's the case, then you're not necessarily helping with the detoxification and processing of the extra chemicals and the extra hormones and all the excess stuff that's in your body. And so you're kind of diminishing your natural ability to heal by fasting with without thinking it through, really, without thinking about the whole entire process, which is why working with someone like Amanda for the whole process of the diet is really important. um, we have a question here, so before I move on,
Okay.
I want to make question about basal body temperature. So what if it fluctuates 1 to 2 degrees?
Okay, so this is a really good question. So the easiest kind of solution I would give you for this is make sure you're holding the thermometer in your mouth for at least a few minutes. Technically, we're supposed to hold it in there for 10 minutes, which is very aggressive, and I understand not everyone's going to do that. But if you could hold the thermometer in your mouth and warm it up for at least a couple minutes, like 2, 3 minutes, before you get out of bed, then that's going to make it so that your temperatures are much more accurate each day.
Great. That's very helpful. I know that it can sometimes be annoying to to take your temperature first thing in the morning and just kind of lay there, but it is really important. So, what would you say are the typical signs of an underactive thyroid? And then what would you say? I had some questions from my stories about overactive thyroid. And could you give kind of a side by side comparison of the two?
So for symptoms, it's honestly like they can be the same. So, and I think this is really like a huge misconception. I had someone comment on my post the other day saying like a lot of people think gaining weight, underactive thyroid, right? Like your thyroid controls our metabolism, so that is a common sign of an underactive thyroid. Hair loss, thinning, or just poor hair growth, feeling cold all the time, low body temperature, low pulse, no appetite, like all those kinds of things, and just period problems like irregular cycles, painful, heavy periods, because your thyroid really controls how much progesterone we make. But then on the other hand, a lot of people think, oh, if my thyroid's overactive, then I'm gonna lose weight. But that's not always the case. I have had plenty of clients that have actually gained weight with an overactive thyroid. But I would say probably the most common like symptom that women experience is just like a very, very quick, like low blood sugars, like you're gonna faint type situation with overactive thyroid. That's probably the most common one that I see. But our thyroid controls how we use glucose from our liver, so like keeping your blood sugar stable throughout the day. So you can also get that with hypo. So it's like it's really tricky. Honestly, get your blood work done and test your thyroid. TSH, free T3, free T4 would be like the minimum that I would recommend. So then you can just know and you're not guessing. Um, yeah, those probably like the biggest things I would say. And then for hyper, kind of like the person wondering like what's the difference? Most hyperthyroidism is the result of autoimmune disease, and so that's Graves' disease. And so whenever there's an autoimmune component, that means your immune system is involved, which means your gut is largely involved. But at the root of all of it, what causes an autoimmune disease is an excessive amount of stress over time. So it's like the same root cause, it's just presenting in a different way, and it involves more of your gut health versus like hypothyroidism, that's not Hashimoto's, like that's not autoimmune related, is typically more like long-term chronic stress.
Right, and the hyper and the autoimmune and the is with the gut is a lot of the inflammation response where your body is just constantly having to fight whatever it feels it's going on. So yeah.
And most, oh,
No, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, for the autoimmune piece, whether it's hypo or hyperthyroidism, or any other immune disease for that matter, it's coming, typically this is the result of us like being either living like in a very high stress type of lifestyle for a long time, just like putting the pedal to the metal for way too long, right? Like living way beyond our needs energetically and stress wise. And then that's when eventually down the road, depending on the person, something like an autoimmune condition is going to present itself.
Right. And there could be something dormant too from genetics that we don't
Yeah.
know about and this go 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 lifestyle or just right like you said we're overtaxing it then that kind of flips the switch and turns it on. So what would you say? You've already given some really great strategies about, getting tested to if you have any of these signs to see, okay, oh, I'm either hyper or hypo. And then where would you, other than the diet piece and the stress piece, where else would you point people in the direction of thinking about, okay, so this is another step that I can take to improve progesterone?
So I think it's just looking at how nutrient dense is your diet. And I feel like nutrient dense can mean different things to different people. Kind of like when people say like I eat clean, I'm like I have no idea what that means. Like we could take that, like me and you could have completely different definitions for that. So
Sure.
when I say nutrient dense, I mean trying to get as many nutrients into the foods that you're eating as possible. But this goes kind of even further with you also need to be able to absorb those nutrients. And I think this is where it gets confusing for people. They're like, but I'm eating all, like, I'm completely plant-based. And I don't know if you're plant-based, but I'm not about the plant-based living. Because of my clients, the ones that come to me plant-based have the most issues. And then we get some animal foods in there and they're just like new people. So, you might be eating foods that you think are packed with nutrients. Like, even think of like leafy greens, calcium, magnesium, vitamins, all those great things. But we're not absorbing a very large percentage of those nutrients. And so if your diet's primarily made up of foods that we're not, like plant foods that we're not absorbing 100% of, then that means that you're missing out on a ton of vitamins and minerals that your body definitely needs, especially when we think of thyroid function, when we think of building hormones, and when we think of what allows our body to convert cholesterol and make hormones, which is our liver. And I laughed when you were talking about the liver, like kind of like the cleanses and detoxes before, because it's like your liver does so much more than detox. Like the fact that people focus on that, I'm like, your liver does a million other things, especially for your hormones. So we want to fuel that. And if you can look at your food and be like, what foods are going to give me the most bang for my buck, a lot of that is really healing animal foods, like any sort of animal protein. Definitely going to be beneficial for most women. It's going to give us protein that we can use the amino acids for to fuel our liver, so that it can do all those things that it's supposed to, so that we can have balanced hormones and a functioning thyroid, because that's where we convert a lot of our thyroid hormone. It also keeps our blood sugar stable when we pair it with a carbohydrate. So it's like really helpful to pair protein and carb throughout the day. And then even things like whether it's like red meat or eggs or dairy, like these are all going to have not only vitamins and minerals, but protein and fat. So it gives us a lot of beneficial nutrients and something that we absorb a much higher percentage of those minerals from. But I will say, like, if you do like to do a lot of veggies, just cook them. Please cook them because you'll absorb so much more from them and they'll be a lot easier for you to digest. So that's kind of like the one big area. And then the other area that I am very supportive of is like trying to get more root veggies in and fruit, because I feel like the focus is always like eat your cruciferous veggies and get your leafy greens in. And I'm like, we are not getting energy from these foods and we need energy to support our hormones and just our bodies. I was reading a research article and it's like the brain uses 120 grams of glucose a day. And I'm like, some people don't even eat that many carbohydrates, you know?
Right.
So I mean, I would say like all the women that I do eat like well much more than that. But like some people come to me eating less than that, and I'm like, this is why you have brain fog, guys, because we're not eating enough to give our brain the glucose to thrive. So if we can get the carbohydrates from the root veggies and fruit, and even things like plantains, those are all gonna have carbohydrates, but all have a ton of minerals. Like potassium is huge for our thyroid health. I do lots of hair testing with clients, and one of the big things I'm looking for is, do you have enough potassium? Because potassium helps our cells take up thyroid hormone. So if you get your blood work done, like we talked about earlier, and you're like, okay, my thyroid looks great, you know, my TSH is normal, I'm making thyroid hormone, I'm converting it, but then you still feel like you have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism and like you're not producing enough progesterone or getting pregnant, then this is where it's like your body's not lying to you. You know, there's just something a little bit deeper, and potassium is going to be your best friend. So those foods also give us those nutrients. So it's kind of like if we can just look at the foods we're eating and make sure primarily our meals are made up of foods that are giving us a ton of nutrients, energy, like macronutrient wise and micronutrient wise, I think that's really the best place to look beyond like progesterone and thyroid for hormone health.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that about potassium. I mean, I know potassium's important, but that's really good to know to also have that checked if you're not, you know, if you're not seeing results with what you're doing. So,
And one thing on potassium is that when you look at your potassium is mostly an intracellular mineral, which means 99% of it's inside the cell. So when you look at blood work, you're looking at extracellular fluid. So if it looks normal on your blood work, you could still do hair testing to see like what does it look like inside the cell.
cool. Very cool. So, um, just want to throw this out to see. Ooh, sorry. If anyone else has any other questions for Amanda or for myself to see.
I just want to say one more thing on the temperature thing because I was just reading her question again. So for yes, like definitely hold it in your mouth longer, but then also your temperature could be fluctuating because like if you slept more one day, if you got up at a different time, if you had alcohol at night, you know, like if you ate less food, so many things can impact that. So if you have, say, like your temperatures are usually around 97.8 and then like it goes down to like 96.9 one day, I just look at that as an outlier and kind of like when you're looking at your chart, just like block it out because sometimes we're going to have those off temperatures.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you could also get a more specialized thermometer. There are ones that are meant for just taking your basal body temperature. Um, Getting
Oh,
up
it was a
10.
good one.
Yes, that would definitely interfere with your temperature in the morning.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know,
And so, for you, if you're waking a lot throughout the night, so you say you're getting up to go to the bathroom, but when of course, we're like sleeping all night. So whenever you wake up, you're gonna have to pee, but that's not what's causing you to wake up, even though it feels like it is, because you're like, but I have to pee. So you think in your mind that's the cause, but truly that's usually related to your blood sugar not staying stable while you're sleeping and not having enough glucose in your liver, because we store that energy there so that when we're sleeping, you release glucose out into the system to keep your blood sugar stable all night. So this technically we all fast every single night. And so if you don't store glucose well, which is very, very common with thyroid issues because our thyroid controls how we put glucose in that liver, then you typically are going to wake up. So I would be on top of the eating breakfast as soon as you wake up and eating throughout the day, and then do a bedtime snack. And over time, that can really help correct that issue. And make sure you're adding some like sea salt and maybe fruit to your water to so that you're not just getting a bunch of plain water that can lead to a little bit more stress and mess with the kidneys.
Yeah, yes. And then from kind of the pelvic health side of getting up in the middle of the night, you also want to make sure that you're actually not drinking too much right before bed as well, which is then making your body have to process that. So typically you wouldn't want to drink if it's part of that, reducing the amount of water that you're drinking or anything that you're drinking 2 hours before you go to bed. You could even do a lymph massage 2 hours before you go to bed so that you can just help your body process any extra fluid that may be accumulating in your body, especially if you are not very active during the day. Your body can just kind of settle some fluid. And then when we lay down, that fluid then actually gets flushed out of our body. And then you have to pee in the middle of the night. So there could be a lot of factors as to why. It could be the diet piece with the glucose. It could be, the actual processing. It could also be if your body, there's an actual hormone that is supposed to stop. It increases at night so that you actually don't have to pee in the middle of the night. That hormone could be off too. So there's a lot of avenues that you could try. Simple ones though, to go there first and see. So I hope that was helpful. You're welcome.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
let's see. Okay, so we got a question about thyroid.
Yeah.
So, what if thyroid came back normal, but sex hormones are still horrible and feeling like crap every day? So, I would say normal is not optimal. So, I'm going to give you some optimal ranges. And so, for you to kind of compare your blood work to, I cannot comment on anyone's blood work on here. So, please don't post your numbers. And also, Instagram is insecure. So, don't share lab work. But TSH, that's the thyroid stimulating hormone, that should be between like 0.5 to 2. That's technically optimal. If yours is higher than 2, like if you're over 2, if you're 3, but you're not quite at 4, which is the top of the normal range, that's still a sign that you're probably not making quite enough thyroid hormone. Free T4 should be 1.4 to 1.8. Lower than that means your thyroid's not producing enough. 5, even 3.2, then that shows that you're not converting that thyroid hormone well. But when we get out of range on thyroid labs, it's typically been brewing for a while, and it's not always the thyroid that's the issue. It could be a deeper issue, like I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure that Ryan's going to share the replay for this, but go back and listen to the nutrition piece again. Listen to the nutrient dense foods, because I've literally had women fix all their issues with food and nutrition and just looking at their stress and their exercise, because I got a lot of over exercisers, or just like the not the best exercise for them at the moment that they're healing. But I would really consider that. And yeah, it's definitely a tricky one, but usually it's like if your hormones don't look great, like they're the last thing to change. So thinking about like what's leading up to that point.
Right. Yeah, you have to think of there's a lot of that subfertility issue where there's a lot of factors in play. Like Amanda said before, it could be gut related in terms of absorption. It could be gut related in terms of inflammation. Um, and so kind of looking at everything that's kind of going on in your lifestyle to manage the stress aspect and the gut health aspect if there's anything going on there. The healthy exercise in terms of too much, which is definitely a problem, definitely a problem, or the too little. Exercise, movement. We are mobile beings. We need movement, even if it's not the traditional exercise that most people think about. We still need to move in ways that are healthy for our bodies to get our gut microbiome healthy and our glucose levels on par. And so there's so much more to it than just exercise. And like Amanda said, it is kind of what's going to work best for you for the exercise piece. So seeing someone like myself or another expert, who can really help you figure out what's going to work for you. So, any other questions?
I'm like scrolling. I'm like, did I miss any? I don't think so. Someone just agreed about the fasting thing though before. Amen.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Do you have any other words of wisdom for us, Amanda?
I think the biggest thing I want to leave people with is that I know that it's really confusing when it comes to eating for your hormones. And um, it's almost like who do I follow? I think the biggest thing is you really want to think about like your body has the ability to heal. All of our bodies do. It's not some like outside source that's doing it, it's you that's doing it. So if you try something and it's not working, but you're like, but I really respect this person and I feel like they know what they're talking about, like you have to listen to the fact that it's not working for your body at this time, especially if you've given it a good chunk of time. So I would say like just keep digging and just question everything. If something doesn't sound right to you, like fasting, question that, right? Anything I post, question it, do your own research, but just know that like if your body's kind of telling you that something is off, it probably is, and that I know that that's really, difficult on this journey, especially with fertility. I work with a lot of clients that struggle with that, and I don't know if there's anything more stressful, honestly. And just kind of giving yourself some grace and knowing like you have the ability. It's just like you have to keep experimenting and trusting that process.
I completely agree with that. And I also think that having that team approach and having multiple people who you trust and feel like you can mix and match with, and they work well together, I think is also really important because for many people, it's not just one thing that's going to work. You have to look at it from all different angles. Um, any good book recommendations? Um, Go ahead, Amanda.
So I think the book How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering is a really good place to start. Um, and I don't have like I do have a one-on-one wait list, but I have a group program that has some one-on-one starting eventually in the next like couple weeks, so you could always look out for that too. Just because my one-on-one is like it's there's a long list, so you might not want to wait for that, and I'm only one person, but read Kate's book. I think it answers a lot of questions. It debunks a ton of myths, and it'll blow your mind in the process.
All right, we have another question. Could dizziness and faint feelings be from nitric oxide issues, or would it always be the result of a hormone imbalance?
Typically, dizziness and faint feelings are much more related to your adrenals. So obviously, our adrenals make hormones, but not necessarily sex hormones. And so I would say I have a really good post on my page about the adrenal elixir. It's got sodium, potassium, and vitamin C, and it's a really great way to just give your adrenals some extra support with food versus, well, technically a drink, versus like trying to do the hormone stuff.
Good to know.
Okay, the name of the book again is How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering.
Okay, here's another question. So, how do we find out our root cause of PCOS?
So a lot of people like to put PCOS in like those four clean categories. I definitely was taught this way by my like original mentor. The way that I look at PCOS now is it's more of a spectrum, and it's all metabolic related. It's like yes, it's an endocrine like hormone issue, but I personally feel like it's really your metabolism that's at the root of that. And so if you can start doing those things like taking your body temperature, understanding like do you have a regular cycle or is it pretty irregular, start looking at like where you're currently at and how far you are from that like ovulating every month, making progesterone, feeling good place, and then that kind of gives you an idea of like how off is your metabolism. I have a free guide too. It's like free starter healthy period guide. It talks about basal body temperature, talks about our metabolism more and how to see like where is yours at right now. I would download that and start to kind of like work your way through. And there's some basic nutrition recommendations too.
Cool. I'll have Amanda give me some of those links so that I can link that with the replay.
Cool.
You're free to get to those for her. They also with PCOS, a lot of that is linked with like gut issues and inflammation and how your body processes glucose. So a lot of the root causes come from that. So which is a piece of metabolism.
I was gonna say
So
metabolism controls all of it. So that's why
right,
I'm always like, we got to start there.
kind of diving into your gut health could be a really nice place to start, to see kind of where, if that is the root cause for you. And there's a lot of different ways that you could start with that: the diet piece, the exercise piece, the stress piece. So kind of where you feel the most comfortable to actually dive into. Okay, so this question is, I thought PCOS was a condition you are born with. How can one develop that in secondary infertility after having 6 kids? Great question.
So PCOS, it doesn't, we're not always, it's like it can be genetic for sure. So technically you can be born with it, but it's not necessarily like you don't always show symptoms right away. Some women, as soon as they get their periods, it's irregular and they get diagnosed with it. Sometimes you might not be as far on that spectrum. Like maybe you have a regular cycle and you're just like, you're not quite as extreme. Like you still ovulate. It's just more of like acne hair growth type of situation, or you still have high androgens even though you're ovulating. So it's not necessarily always like going to be a classic case that's much easier to diagnose. And you can get PCO, like it could be like the stress piece, kind of like the autoimmune conditions of how over time, especially like after having 6 kids, your body is going to be much more taxed. Your minerals are going to be much more depleted. And so if you were, on the end of the spectrum where it wasn't as extreme, it could have developed to become more extreme over time. And I think that secondary infertility is actually the most common type of infertility. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that play with secondary infertility and how, like Amanda said, your body can be completely depleted of nutrients. Depends on what your pregnancies and your births were like for how your physical healing happened and your physical self is working and functioning, because it could have changed your how your uterus is actually functioning and how your ovaries are, because maybe there's some scar tissue or there's adhesions from that birth now that are now interfering with the blood circulation in the area and the absorption. And so there's a lot that can play out even after having 6 kids, for secondary infertility. And there's a lot of different things that you can do for it, that is not usually addressed in the typical medical realm. So don't give up hope with that.
Yeah,
Um,
especially when I think of like the mineral piece and how she's talking about like she's like blood work was negative for PCOS technically, and she just kind of came on suddenly with infertility and not ovulating in the polycystic ovaries. Like we have to remember that that's not necessarily PCOS. You have to have 2 out of the 3 criteria. And so if your blood work was negative and then you had some cysts on your ovaries, it's like you could still be on that spectrum. Because if you don't ovulate, you're going to get cysts on your ovaries. So it's not necessarily, that's why the diagnosis, like it's helpful, but it's like you have to look beyond that because you have to think about what is causing this. And I would say after having 6 kids, you're probably very depleted. It's also so taxing on your thyroid. Your body has to produce twice as much energy when you're pregnant. That's why a lot of women end up taking thyroid medication even just during pregnancy, because it's such a big thing and stress. So I would really consider digging deeper, because it just sounds like something could be off, like mineral wise, that's making it so that your thyroid can't work properly, and then that's what's leading leading to the poor, not ovulating, cystic ovaries, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with the depletion. Um, Doctors are pushing. Yeah, I mean, I would see if you could find someone outside of the typical medical um, world, a nutritionist, a dietitian, a naturopath, someone who may be able to dive in deeper with you, um, to see, really what might be going on, causing those things. Yeah. Okay, so here's another question. Is hair thinning mostly linked to hormone imbalances?
So I did a whole hair loss series because it's such a big topic, and it was a really big part of my journey. So hair loss can definitely be linked to hormone imbalances and not just sex hormones. Like estrogen and progesterone definitely impact our hair, but it can also be just a thyroid and nutrient thing too, right? I think a lot of people think of iron when they think of hair, but I think of copper levels and vitamin A, and is your body using those minerals properly? And so I would first look at your nutrition because hair growth takes energy. And to keep our hair follicles healthy, they need nutrients. And so if they're not getting those from our diet, then they're going to be not as healthy. And then they eventually, they're dysregulated and our hair falls out. So I think food first always. And then, of course, thinking back about your stress, because stress will definitely lead to hair loss. It's usually like 3 months later. That's a really big one. And then, yes, hormones matter. Like we need enough thyroid hormone. We definitely need to have enough progesterone. And a lot of people focus on androgens, like male hormones and hair loss, but a lot of the research says that it's actually more estrogen. So if you have too much estrogen, of course, that can have a downstream effect on thyroid and impact the hair. So I think like taking a multifaceted approach is huge, and also the health of your scalp is super super important. And I think not enough people focus on that. Like even just getting circulation, like massaging your scalp. It sounds very basic, but if you don't have blood flow, you're not going to get the nutrients. But I have a highlight on my profile called hair loss, and it goes through the whole series that I did on that.
Great question. Any other questions?
We got a lot of good ones.
Good. Okay.
All right.
I think we're questioned out. So so for those who want to watch the replay, you can head over to my profile to sign up to get the replay sent to you. And it would be all 4 of the interviews in this entire series. I could be here all night asking questions. So yeah, so you would get all 4 series, and we talk about a whole spectrum of fertility, fertility support, as well as I will be putting links into offers that some people have been making, as well as links to some freebies, like Amanda said about today that she has linked. So I will. Oh, we have another question. Oh, can you you said this before, the optimal FSH level. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I said TSH before. FSH, you want to compare it to your LH. You want like a 2-to-1 ratio. So you would want to compare those two numbers. And if it's not 2-to-1, then that's can be a sign that the brain is not signaling properly to your ovaries.
Great. Okay. Okay, so last call for questions. Any others? Okay. So thank you so much, Amanda, for joining me. This was super informational.
Okay,
Oh,
optimal TSH. Good question to end on. 0.5 to 2.0 is the optimal range.
awesome. So for those who want to watch the replay, head over to my profile to register for the email that will have all of the replays in it, as well as links to the specific experts. So thank you for joining us. And Amanda, I hope you have a good night.
You too. Bye.